Welcome to this deep dive. Today we're looking at those moments, those pivotal times when something inside just shifts, when the everyday suddenly feels extraordinary. It makes me think of like holding a glass of water and adding drops, one by one. And then that last drop makes it overflow.
Right.
That drop isn't really different, but the effect, it's huge, transformative.
Yeah, that's a powerful image, the overflowing glass. It really captures that sense of a threshold, doesn't it?
Exactly.
A point we don't always see coming. We often think of change as, gradual, a smooth curve. But these moments, they feel qualitatively different, like stepping onto a completely different level.
Yes, that tipping point. And it got me thinking about perception, how we actually see things. And digging into this, I came across some really fascinating ideas from Gestalt psychology.
Ah, yes, Gestalt. Very relevant here.
This idea that we don't just process isolated bits, we automatically organize everything into like meaningful wholes, patterns.
That's absolutely central. Our minds are pattern-making machines, constantly striving for coherence, for things to make sense, to feel stable and complete.
Okay.
Think about the figure ground principle from Gestalt.
Right, figure and ground.
Our attention zooms in on something, the figure and everything else just fades into the background, right? The ground.
Yeah, it does.
But what if the real keys to these big internal shifts are actually lying dormant in that background, in those little details we usually ignore?
That's interesting. It makes so much sense when you think about, say, someone in a really difficult relationship.
Okay.
They might spend years kind of explaining away harmful behavior,
Yeah.
normalizing it.
Rationalizing, yeah. It's a defense mechanism.
Totally. And then one day, maybe a small comment, something they've probably heard loads of times before, suddenly hits differently.
Lands with force.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the whole reality they've constructed just collapses.
Yeah.
Why that comment? Why then?
Well, Gestalt would talk about the drive for closure. Our minds really want to complete patterns to resolve tensions.
Closure, okay.
So when there's unresolved stuff, conflicts, feelings we're pushing down, it creates this psychological pressure. It builds often beneath the surface.
Like a pressure cooker.
Sort of, yeah. And that seemingly small comment, it might just be the final piece needed to complete this larger hidden pattern of maybe dysfunction or unhappiness.
Oh.
It forces a confrontation with the reality that was being, actively pushed away.
It's like that image of a string being pulled tighter and tighter. Every little unresolved thing, every ignored feeling just adds a bit more tension. You don't notice each tiny bit.
Individually, no.
But eventually the whole system is so strained, it doesn't necessarily snap, but it vibrates intensely, that internal explosion.
That's a really good way to put it, vibrates intensely. And the crucial point isn't destruction, not annihilation. It's more like a revelation, a release.
Okay.
The old structure, the one that wasn't working, it gives way. And that creates space.
Space for something new.
Exactly. And linking back to figure ground, what was lurking in the background, maybe denial or fear, suddenly jumps forward, becomes the sharp focus, demands attention.
It reminds me of this other image. Walking in a familiar forest at dusk.
Okay. Yeah.
The paths, the trees. But then the moonlight hits a branch just so, casts this weird shadow you've never seen. And suddenly the whole familiar place feels alien? Unsettling, maybe?
Right. The shadow potential was always there. The branch was always there.
Yeah. But your perception hadn't put it together that way before.
Precisely. These transformative moments are often like that. They illuminate what was already present, just overlooked, unseen.
So why do we miss these things? Why does it often take reaching a breaking point?
Well, part of it seems to be our brain's preference for stability. We build mental models, shortcuts really, to simplify the world.
Makes sense. Reduces uncertainty.
Exactly, and they work fine most of the time, until reality deviates too much from the model.
Then you get that cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
That uncomfortable feeling.
Yes. That clash. And our first instinct is often to resist, to ignore the new information, maybe distort it, just to keep our existing beliefs intact.
Cling to the familiar narrative.
Right. But that resistance, paradoxically, increases the internal tension. It's like bending metal. The more you fight the bend, the more strain builds up inside.
Until it gives way.
Until it gives way. And that release of stored energy, the energy of all those unacknowledged truths, buried feelings, unmet needs, that's the internal explosion. It overwhelms the defenses.
And forces this radical reorganization, a whole new gestalt, a new inner picture.
And a whole new picture, and attention Attention is absolutely critical in this whole process.
How so?
Well, we're constantly filtering, right? Selecting what to focus on. And it's not passive. Our expectations, our emotions, the context. It all biases what we pay attention to.
So our attention actively shapes the reality we actually experience.
Absolutely. If you're expecting trouble, you'll probably find it because that's where your attention is directed.
Right. Or if you're determined to see the good, you might miss the warning signs.
Exactly. And these big transformative moments, they often happen when something disrupts our usual attention patterns.
Like a jolt.
Yeah, a jolt. A word, a gesture, even just a stray thought can suddenly make us see things completely differently. A new figure emerges from the ground.
There's this great example, like being in a noisy cafe. All the chatter's just background hum. But then you clearly hear someone say, maybe at the next table, I can't keep pretending everything's fine.
Ooh, yeah.
It wasn't meant for you, but maybe it hits something deep inside you, something you haven't admitted.
And suddenly, that phrase cuts through everything. The cafe hasn't changed,
No.
but your perception, your internal focus has been completely altered.
Wow. Which brings up this huge question, doesn't it? Control. Can we predict these moments or even make them happen?
The paradox of control. Well, yes and no, I think.
Okay.
No, in the sense that they often feel utterly spontaneous, like lightning flashes. You can't really schedule an epiphany, can you?
No. Tuesday at 3? Probably not.
Probably not. But yes, in the sense that we can cultivate a certain kind of awareness. We can try to tune in more to those subtle signals.
Like intuition. Or those little nagging doubts.
Exactly. Those fleeting sensations that hint something deeper is stirring. Gestalt calls it a phenomenological inquiry, paying attention to raw experience without jumping to judgment.
Just noticing what is.
Right. But even then, predicting the exact moment, that seems elusive. It depends not just on what happens outside us, but also on our internal readiness.
Like water reaching boiling point. It needs the right temperature and pressure.
Precisely. The psychological conditions have to align.
So we can't force it, but maybe we can prepare the ground, be more open.
I think that's a good way to look at it. Cultivating that interconnection might make us more receptive when we are nearing a threshold.
It definitely makes you think back on your own life, those big shifts. They often felt surprising at the time, but looking back.
They seem almost inevitable, don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Inevitable in hindsight.
And this brings us to thinking about the whole field of perception. Everything in our awareness right now, thoughts, feelings, sensations, memories, the environment.
A whole canvas of consciousness.
Exactly. And within that field, we're constantly organizing, prioritizing, creating that figure and ground based on our needs, goals, expectations.
We operate within these familiar, stable patterns, these gestalts.
Until something new comes along that just doesn't fit.
Right. That creates that feeling of incompleteness.
Yes. That drive for closure we talked about, that innate need to resolve what feels unfinished, fragmented. If that closure is denied or avoided,
The tension builds.
precisely, until something triggers a release, forcing a reorganization, a new, more complete gestalt. And attention is the conductor of this whole orchestra.
The spotlight moving around the field.
Yeah, highlighting things based on novelty, intensity, significance to us.
So back to the difficult relationship example.
Okay.
For years, the spotlight might be on the good times. The hope, that's the figure.
Ignoring the background warnings.
But then, bang, a critical event shifts the spotlight. Suddenly the disrespect, the neglect that becomes the figure. And the whole picture changes.
And it's profound because it's not just seeing different details, it's changing how we see. Perception is holistic. A new figure transforms the entire gestalt.
It reshapes everything, understanding, sense of self.
The explosion isn't isolated, it echoes through the whole field.
And insight plays a huge role here too, right? Those aha moments.
Absolutely. Insight feels like it bypasses our usual thinking, our defenses. It suddenly reveals connections we didn't see before.
Like a light bulb turning on.
Exactly. And it often comes when that underlying tension has built up. All the unresolved stuff creates this latent structure, a potential gestalt waiting to form.
And a trigger, a word, an image just crystallizes it.
It catalyzes it, releases that stored energy as illumination. And there's this related concept, isomorphism.
Okay, what's that?
It's the idea that there's a kind of structural correspondence between our inner world and the outer world. Our perception mirrors how our psyche is organized.
So an internal explosion isn't just internal. It reflects a shift in the structure of our consciousness itself.
That's the idea. And it might even manifest subtly in how we interact with the world.
It's like the person stuck in the dead-end job.
Yeah, maybe they blame external stuff, the boss, the economy,
Uh-huh.
but the deeper issue is a mismatch between their values and their actions. Then they hear an inspiring story, maybe.
And bam. Insight.
Insight. It reframes everything. The job isn't just a job, it's a symbol of self-betrayal. That insight can fuel real action, real change.
But it's not always comfortable disclosure, is it?
Definitely not. Often these explosions mean facing really painful truths, dismantling illusions we've cherished. It can feel very destabilizing.
You have to let go of something.
Yes. Gestalt talks about functional closure, like finishing a task, and existential closure, grappling with meaning, identity. Internal explosions often involve both.
Like grief. Loss creates this huge void.
A profound incompleteness. Denial might be a temporary shield, but that drive for existential closure pushes us to eventually face the loss, integrate the absence.
Which brings relief eventually, but it requires letting go.
It requires sacrifice, old identities, routines, relationships. Letting go can be painful, but it's often necessary for growth. Otherwise, we stay trapped in incomplete patterns.
It really highlights that drive for wholeness, doesn't it? Bringing things together.
Absolutely. And modern life, with its distractions, its multitasking, can really fragment our experience.
Makes it harder to see the big picture.
Right. These internal explosions, in a way, force us to pause, refocus, and see those connections, those larger patterns again.
And what about things like synchronicity? Meaningful coincidences?
Ah, yes. Those often seem to cluster around transformative times, don't they? A book falls open to just the right page, you meet someone with a strangely parallel story.
Defies easy explanation.
From a Gestalt perspective, you could see them as reflections of that isomorphism idea, reminders that things are interconnected, inner and outer worlds mirroring each other.
It suggests nothing is truly isolated. Every part affects the whole.
Tuning into that can help cultivate a more integrated way of being.
So fundamentally, these internal explosions, despite the upheaval, are about reorganizing our whole perceptual world, shifting figure and ground, resolving tension, sparking insight.
Precisely. And maybe the most profound thing is just how universal they are. Everyone goes through moments like these, triggered by all sorts of things.
It's sharing that common thread, waking us up.
Waking us up to life's fullness and maybe the difficult truth that sometimes things need to break down for new growth to happen.
And then there's the aftermath, the ripples.
Yes, the disruption of old patterns opens up new possibilities. It's unpredictable, exciting, but also vulnerable.
You have to give up some control.
You do. Transformation liberates, but it always involves the risk of loss.
And it's tempting to think these moments bring final answers, right? Like, okay, figured that out.
Yes, the illusion of finality. But experience is always flowing, changing. These new understandings, these gestalts, they're temporary structures, useful now, but not permanent.
Like a kaleidoscope. The
Yeah.
pattern feels complete, then you turn it.
And a new one forms. Exactly. These moments are thresholds, not endpoints. They lead to deeper awareness, but the journey continues. Each pattern contributes to self-discovery.
Which brings us back to choice. These moments open doors, show us possibilities we didn't see before. That's empowering.
Immensely empowering, but freedom brings responsibility. Choices have consequences.
And Gestalt emphasizes contact here, right? Fully showing up in the present.
Yes, engaging fully. It takes presence, courage, willingness to sit with discomfort sometimes. It's about active participation, not passive observation.
So after the explosion, the insight, what do you do with it?
That's the key, isn't it? Intentionality. Do you use the insight to break free, or does fear make you retreat into old patterns?
And these moments can also bring up the difficult stuff, the shadow side.
Oh, absolutely. They often illuminate what we've repressed, fears, desires, weaknesses we don't like to admit to.
Facing the shadow.
It requires humility, willingness to be uncomfortable, but it's essential for wholeness. Gestalt would say we fragment ourselves by splitting off these parts. Integration means reclaiming them.
So someone who prides themselves on kindness might realize it's masking deep anger.
Exactly. That realization challenges their self-image, but it allows for a richer, more honest self where maybe compassion and assertiveness can coexist.
Ultimately, these moments seem to connect us to something bigger too, that shared human search for meaning.
Yes, they remind us we're interconnected, part of a larger whole. It invites a perspective beyond just the ego, embracing a bit of mystery.
And it circles back to that emphasis on direct experience, sensations, emotions, what's happening right now.
Honoring the richness of the present. but also acknowledging impermanence, which brings maybe a touch of bittersweetness. Perhaps that lingering sense of incompleteness isn't a flaw.
But just part of being alive.
Perhaps. It suggests these are ongoing processes, not one-off events. An invitation to keep living in the question, embracing ambiguity.
Learning to savor the journey itself, not just chase definitive answers.
Which takes patience, resilience. Holding contradictions, honoring both light and shadow, celebrating the process of becoming. Letting go of rigid control, but staying grounded in our values.
The real power, then, is how they wake us up to our potential, showing the transformation is like a spiral. We revisit things, but hopefully from a higher vantage point each time.
Beautifully put. Approaching each day with that openness, knowing the very next moment could hold that transformative potential.
Thank you for diving deep with us today into this fascinating, sometimes shattering, but ultimately revealing world of internal explosions, viewed through that really helpful lens of Gestalt psychology.
My pleasure. It's rich territory.
We really hope this exploration offered some useful perspectives on those moments that can just completely redefine how we see ourselves and the world. Maybe take a moment to consider the thresholds in your own life. Are you aware of approaching one now? What might that next transformative drop be for you? We encourage you to keep mulling over these ideas, see what resonates most deeply with your own experience.